Hey there, it's Alex Goad and I'm back with my 10x Your Life series. And today we're going to talk about part 2, or the second 5 out of the 10 principles of Ascension for the 21st century. So what is this about? If you didn't watch the previous video, I highly recommend that you go back and watch it. It's available on my blog at alexgoad.com. What is this about? Well, it's about the fact that I've discovered, while taking my life from being a minimum wager, a chronic underachiever, to building 3 multi-million-dollar companies in 3 different niches. And all of that was made possible by the fact that I discovered these 10 principles of how to do things, how to become, how to think, how to audit myself, so that I could achieve anything that I wanted. So I went from being a very low achiever to a very high achiever. And it didn't happen by magic. I didn't join the army. I actually stumbled into it face first and had a lot of trial and error. And this is what I came up with. So again, if you haven't watched the first 5 from the first video, I highly recommend you go back and watch that first. And if you have, or if you're the kind of person that doesn't follow instructions, then let's start with this right now. All right, so this should actually be the 5th or the 6th principle, but you know how hard up I am on recycling, so I'm reusing my little papers here. All right, so principle number 6, commitment. So I'm going to quote myself. The size and duration of the commitments that you can reliably make and keep determine the size of your life. There's 2 parts to commitment, really. There's how much horsepower does it take to do this? Do you have the horsepower to make a big commitment? And then how much consistency can you manage over time? Can you kind of say that you're going to start doing something today, even if it just takes 5 minutes a day, and consistently be doing it a week later, 2 weeks later, a month, a year, 5 years? Because the highest achievers in the world have these things in common. They're able to make a commitment that has a large size and requires a lot of horsepower, and they're able to almost systematically lock anything that they set their mind to into this part of themselves where automatically their success mechanism just takes them towards it and they never have to look back. The number one thing that I see today that messes up people's minds, messes up their ability to do things, and messes up, let's be real, their self-confidence and their self-esteem, and they don't even notice that they're doing it, is that they go through life all day long and they make these little commitments, or these medium-sized commitments, or even these big commitments. And then by the end of the day, whoosh, gone. What happened to it? They don't even know. They didn't even realize that they made that commitment. So this is one of the most important things that you can do. You want to change your life today? Try this. Observe yourself today and let your brain see what comes out of your mouth. And you'll see, you might find that your mouth seems to have a mind of its own, and it says, I'm going to do that. It says, I'm going to call you later. It says, when I get home tonight, I'm going to lace up my shoes and go for a jog instead of plopping my butt on the couch and watching Netflix. And then, did it happen or did it not happen? And if you see that your mouth says a lot of things that actually don't happen in your life, then you're breaking your success mechanism every time that you do it. Here's how you have to look at things. Sure, you can fool yourself. You can fool others. We do that all day long, every day. But there's one thing and one person that you can't fool. And that's a part of you called the silent observer. And that guy or gal or whatever it is sees everything. It sees everything and it analyzes it. And so if you're the kind of person that constantly says that you're going to do things and then you don't do it, that part of you kind of becomes a critic. It becomes a part of you that resists kind of doing anything, and it prevents you from locking any goal or objective in any kind of real manner inside of yourself, because it's like, hey bro, you said you're going to do these 100 million things and you haven't done any of them, so I'll believe it when I see it. If you're doing anything that resembles that, you'll see that you're not going to lose out by making less commitments, but keeping Every single one of them. Try it just for a week and you'll see that little voice inside of you is going to start going like, yeah, you got this, instead of like, never mind. Commitment. All right. The next factor is your mission. This can almost be considered your why. So the size of this is incredibly important because this is the thing that inspires you or fails to inspire you. And so many of us in today's world live our lives based on other people's ideas, other people's desires, other people's programs that we got while we were growing up, and we haven't investigated them, and we haven't found our own, and we haven't actually had the courage to lock into our sights things that actually matter to us. When you do that, it changes basically your ability to do everything. Because when you have a mission rather than just a goal, and a goal is better than a to-do, those things have energy. They give you the energy that carries you through where you need to get to. So the size of your mission is critically important to the overall energy of your life and the overall feeling that you have there. And it's even the thing that'll say, why would you be courageous about doing a to-do? You're not going to be courageous, but if it's for your mission, if it's for a greater good, if it's for something that you believe in, heart and soul, then yes, you will. So it changes everything. So everybody should be on a mission. Because as the great plastic surgeon who became one of the top self-help authors of the 20th century, Maxwell Maltz, sold 30 million books. He basically says that human beings are goal-striving mechanisms. In other words, we're made to have an objective and to be moving towards it. And when we don't do that, all sorts of bad things happen. Next point. So the next point is your environment. And when I talk about environment, and I'm going to talk about this a lot in further videos, but when I talk about environment, there's really two sides to it. There's the outside environment, and there's your inside environment. So things in the outside environment might be, for example, if you've made a commitment to somebody, if you have a deadline that you need to meet, and otherwise there's going to be negative consequences. Another factor might be who's looking at you, who's keeping score. Those things matter to us a great deal, and they're things that we should be using as tools to drive ourselves forward. Now, the other thing is that there's the inside environment, and that's why I call environment, I made up a word for it, I call it the paramosphere, because there's so many different parameters in that environment, including the internal ones, that determine how and what we can do. So here's some internal parameters. Well, we already talked about this one, self-confidence. If you feel like you're the kind of person who can lock a goal into your mind and go for it, then that's a parameter of your environment. And if you don't have that parameter in place in your environment, then it gives you a very weak base to start anything from. Another internal parameter of the environment is what that silent observer thinks about you. So if you're the kind of person who's accumulated too many failures in your life and you dwell too much on those failures and you don't rewrite that story, then that also gives you kind of a mushy base on which it's very hard to take a firm step forward from. So there's a very smart man and a mentor of mine called Dan Sullivan, and he says that you should always make your future bigger than your past. And when your future is bigger than your past, it pulls you forward towards it. And this is another parameter of your internal components. It's what's your vision for your future? And if it's bigger than your past, then you can bet that it can pretty much overcome all of the little shortcomings, the little mistakes, the little setbacks. Environment. The next factor, very, very important. The great Dan Kennedy this time, one of the top small business coaches and marketing coaches of all time, perhaps number one, actually, I should say, says that the only success you will ever have comes from your ability to produce. When you can produce the right stuff, when you can sit your butt down in that chair and write that proposal, write that blog post, shoot that little video and get it up on social media, when you can figure out what you need to get done and then be able to produce it, That's what matters more than anything else. It's not dreaming about it, it's not thinking about it, it's not feeling about it. All of those things are extremely precarious. But if you can sit down and do it and have something that you've outputted at the end of the day, where you have a tangible thing that you can turn in somewhere, that you can publish, that's production. And I'll tell you what, if you can do just 1 hour a day of production, you can get spectacular results. Think about it this way. If you write 1 single page a day for 300 days in a year, then you can write a 300-page book every year. And that'll take you less than an hour a day. That's output. And if you have a system for it, then you can output on whatever it is that you need to do, and you can get spectacular results. So there's really a system for doing things that I'd love to share with you in one of these upcoming videos. Next factor. The next factor is your habits. So it's very clear. Here's a great way to look at this. A great way to look at it is that our habits are our masters, and we are only their slaves. You know, if you think that you can overcome your habits, that's like negotiating with destiny. It's very, very hard to do. I read recently a piece of research that showed that for most human beings, 95% of what we do all day long, 95% is scripted, is repetitive, is the same thing that we do every day, and we do it the same way. So only 5% of what we do is kind of up there, up for grabs, and is composed of creativity and total freedom of action. So if 95% of what we do on a daily basis is predetermined in advance, is scripted, then it's obvious that the way that you do it and the quality of those habits has a huge impact on how your life turns out. One of the most important habits that I learned on my path was the one where you can eradicate procrastination. Procrastination is actually one of the most costly things that I've ever come across. And almost everybody does it, including very accomplished people. There's a whole lot of good reasons to procrastinate, because if you don't do anything, then you can't fail, right? And that's just one of the reasons why people procrastinate. But what if you could become the kind of person that literally produces on command? No procrastination possible. What if you were the kind of person who could just sit down at the desk and knock out important tasks one after another without having any distraction, without feeling any intimidation, without having to convince yourself or negotiate or eat your fingernails or pace back and forth in the room for 15 minutes, an hour, a day, maybe a month, maybe years go by and you haven't started doing the thing that you most want to do? Well, I can show you how to get over that in about 5 minutes, and it works 100% of the time. That's just one of the videos that's coming up in the next installments. Before we go, I want to tell you just about 3 things that almost everybody over-identifies with and thinks that these are the important things. This is how you get things done. This is how you reach your full potential. In my experience, it's not. Here's one of them. Discipline. Discipline is a tool, and discipline is something that you acquire when you're in the right environment, doing the right thing with the right people. Case in point, if you look, I've had a ton of my friends join the Army because they felt that they didn't have a lot of discipline. They went into the Army, and then they did have a lot of discipline while they were there because it was necessary in that environment. But then when they come back to a normal or kind of less demanding environment, the discipline goes away. So it appears that discipline is anchored in mission and anchored in environment, and it's not this thing that kind of exists alone. So if you focus on it disproportionately, you're focusing on the tool rather than the end result or the reason why you use the tool. All right, then next one, willpower. I have a book recommendation for you right now. It's called Willpower Doesn't Work. It was written and published this year by the excellent young author Benjamin Hardy. And I think the title is pretty self-evident, but the whole book goes to show that there's so many things that are more important than willpower. Willpower is an extremely finite resource. Like, we have like this much of it. So yeah, it does count for something, but you can't muscle through weeks, months, years of doing things that are difficult and challenging using only willpower. It won't even get you 10% of the way. Everything else is what does the heavy lifting, and willpower is just the tiny little thing that when you feel yourself going off track, you go like, I'm getting back to it. That's willpower. That's its place. And finally, knowledge. You know, we like to say that reading is so important, that education is so important. And so many people in today's world, did you know that right now, I think in every 10 seconds of the day that passes, there's 24 hours of video uploaded to YouTube. Probably by the time you watch this, it's every 1 second that passes by, there's 24 hours of video uploaded to YouTube. Meaning that the quantity of information in this world, the quantity of knowledge to be had, is constantly expanding. And it's actually a mistake to try and keep up with it, because knowledge is not power. Knowledge that you convert into production, knowledge that alters your behavior and the way that you show up in your life and the decisions that you make or the way that you feel, now that can be converted into power. But knowing more stuff very rarely does. So, don't fall into these false traps. Focus on the things that are actually important. I guarantee you, if you follow the 10 principles of Ascension for the 21st century, your mind will be blown at what you're able to accomplish. And you will be very surprised to see how quickly you can go from being an underachiever to being someone that constantly strives to exploit more of their potential until finally one day maybe you get to use the whole thing. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So hey, like I said, there's a part 1 to this. If you enjoy this, there's more on the way, so enter your name or email in the box below. I'm Alex Goad, and as usual, I remind you that today is your day and today matters. So comport yourself accordingly. Thanks for watching.